My neighbor showed up soaking wet at my door, holding a stack of papers and said, "Please, be my man by Friday." The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days straight. I'm Marcus Webb, 34 years old, single dad, and the kind of man who minds his own business. I work nights at the county hospital as a surgical technician, come home before sunrise, make my daughter Zoe her breakfast, drop her at school, and sleep until noon. That's my life. Clean, quiet, controlled. I wasn't looking for anything to change it. But on a Thursday night at 11:47 p.m., someone knocked on my door like the world was ending. I almost didn't answer. I was in the middle of folding laundry, Zoe's little pink socks lined up in a row, when the knock came, hard, desperate. Not the knock of someone selling something, the knock of someone drowning. I opened the door. And there she was. My neighbor from the white farmhouse across the gravel road, Claire Donovan. I'd seen her maybe a dozen times in 2 years. She drove a sensible silver SUV, she kept her porch light on. She waved when she passed, that was the entirety of what I knew about her. Right now she looked like she'd walked through a hurricane. Her blonde hair was plastered to her face, her black jacket soaked completely through, and in her arms, pressed against her chest like they were the most precious things on earth, was a thick, messy stack of papers and folders, all getting wet at the edges. Her eyes were red. She'd been crying before the rain got to her. "Marcus," she said. Her voice cracked on just my name. I stepped back. "Come inside." She hesitated for exactly 1 second, like her pride was fighting her desperation, and then she stepped through the door. I gave her a towel, made coffee. Didn't ask anything. She sat at my kitchen table, the stack of papers in front of her, and just breathed for a minute. I sat across from her and waited. Zoe was asleep upstairs. The house was quiet except for the rain hitting the windows. Finally, Claire looked up at me. "I need a husband," she said, "by Friday." I set my coffee mug down. "That's 4 days from now," I said. "I know. And you're at my door at midnight." "I know." She pressed her lips together. "I know how this sounds, Marcus. I do. But I am completely out of options, and you are, honestly, the only person I trust enough to even ask." I looked at her, then at the papers. "What's in the stack?" She slid the top folder across the table to me. I opened it. Inside was a custody agreement. Legal documents, court stamps, a child's photograph paperclipped to the front page, a little girl, maybe 7 years old, with Claire's same blue eyes and a gap-toothed smile. "Her name is Lily," Claire said quietly. "She's my niece. My younger sister passed away 8 months ago. Car accident on Route 9. Lily's father was never in the picture. I've been her legal guardian since the funeral." I looked at the photograph a moment longer. Something in my chest tightened. "There's a court hearing Friday morning," Claire continued. "Lily's paternal grandmother, a woman named Judith Crane, is filing for full custody. She has money, a big house, and a lawyer who charges $400 an hour." Claire's jaw tightened. "And her entire argument is that a single woman with no partner, running a struggling small business, is not a stable enough home for Lily. And if you show up with a husband, the judge sees a 2-parent household. Stability. A home." She exhaled slowly. "It's not a permanent thing. I'm not asking you to actually marry me. My attorney says a documented domestic partnership, or even a credible long-term relationship that we can present, combined with my financials and home environment, could shift the ruling." She paused. "It's legal. Barely, but it's legal." I leaned back in my chair and studied her face. She wasn't lying. I've worked in trauma care long enough to know what real desperation looks like. It doesn't perform. It just sits there, exhausted, asking for help. "What do you need from me specifically?" I asked. She blinked, like she hadn't expected me to still be in the conversation. "Come to the hearing, sit beside me, let my attorney introduce you as my partner, answer a few basic questions if the judge asks. That's it. And if this goes wrong? Then I lose Lily to a woman who never once visited her while my sister was alive." Her voice didn't break, but her hands flattened against the table. "I won't let that happen. I can't." The rain outside grew louder. I thought about Zoe upstairs. About the night her mother left. No note, no call, just gone. And how I'd sat in this same kitchen at 2 a.m., wondering how I was going to do any of this alone. About every person who'd ever looked at me like a single black man couldn't possibly be enough of a parent. I knew what it felt like to have someone question whether you were enough. "All right," I said. Claire stared at me. "All right? I'll be there Friday." She opened her mouth, closed it. Her eyes filled again, and she looked away quickly, the way people do when they refuse to cry in front of someone they barely know. "You don't even really know me," she whispered. "I know you've had your porch light on every single night for 8 months," I said, "and I know kids need someone willing to fight for them." She looked back at me then, really looked at me. "Thank you, Marcus." The next 3 days were something I hadn't expected. Claire came over each evening after Lily was in bed, and we sat at my kitchen table going through her attorney's prep questions. "What's your partner's middle name? How long have you been together? Where did you first meet? Who cooks dinner?" We built a story carefully. Nothing dramatic, just quiet, ordinary details that sounded like a real life. What I didn't expect was how easy it was. She already knew that Zoe's favorite color was yellow because she'd left a yellow kite on our porch last spring with a handwritten note that said, "For your little one, saw it at the farmer's market." I'd forgotten that, but I remembered it now. I already knew that she woke up at 5 a.m. every morning because I'd seen her kitchen light from my window during my late-night drives home. I'd just never thought about why. "Lily has nightmares," Claire said quietly one evening when I mentioned the light. "I sit in the kitchen so I can hear her if she calls." We sat with that for a moment. On Wednesday evening, Zoe came downstairs for water and found Claire at our table. She looked at her with the completely unfiltered curiosity of a 6-year-old. "Are you Daddy's friend?" she asked. "I'm trying to be," Claire said honestly. Zoe thought about this. Then she climbed into the chair next to Claire, pulled the stack of papers toward her and said, "These look important." "You should put them in a folder," Zoe said seriously. "Daddy always says loose papers are a disaster waiting to happen." Claire laughed, a real laugh, sudden and bright. She looked at me over Zoe's head, and something in her expression shifted, like she was seeing me differently. I felt it too. Friday morning came gray and cold. We drove to the courthouse in my truck. Claire wore a navy dress and kept her hands folded in her lap. I wore my good charcoal suit, the one I'd bought for my hospital's annual gala and worn exactly once. Zoe was at school. Lily was with Claire's attorney's assistant in the waiting area, coloring in a book, completely unaware of what was happening 40 feet away in courtroom B. Judith Crane sat on the other side of the aisle, early 60s, pearls, a lawyer in a 3-piece suit whispering in her ear. She looked at me once, measured, cold, and looked away. When Claire's attorney introduced me, I sat straight and spoke clearly. The judge, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and no patience for theater, asked me 3 questions directly. "How long have you known Ms. Donovan? What is your relationship with the child, Lily? What does your daily life look like as a family?" I answered every question without hesitation, not because we'd rehearsed perfectly, but because somewhere in those 3 evenings at my kitchen table, the answers had quietly become true. The judge reviewed the documents. She looked at Claire's home assessment, her financial records, her neighbors' letters of support. Then she looked at Judith Crane's attorney and said, simply, "A grandmother's desire for connection does not constitute grounds for disrupting an established, stable guardian relationship. Motion for full custody transfer is denied." Claire's hand found mine under the table. She gripped it hard, and I let her. Outside the courthouse, the sun had finally broken through. Lily came running down the hallway when she saw Claire, arms open, braids flying. And Claire caught her and held on like she'd been underwater for months, and had finally reached the surface. I stood back and gave them that moment. Then Lily turned and looked at me with those wide blue eyes. "Are you the man from across the road?" she asked. "That's me," I said. "Claire said you help people." She tilted her head. "Do you like waffles? Because Claire makes really good waffles on Saturdays." I smiled. I couldn't help it. "I do like waffles." "Good." She grabbed Claire's hand and mine at the same time and started walking toward the parking lot like it had already been decided. Maybe it had. That Saturday morning, I sat at Claire's kitchen table while she made waffles. Lily was setting out the syrup with enormous seriousness. Zoe, who I'd picked up from school early, with absolutely no good explanation, sat across from Lily and was already sharing her opinion on whether strawberries or blueberries were superior. The verdict, both. Claire set a plate in front of me and caught my eye. "I don't know how to repay you," she said quietly. "You kept your porch light on," I said, "for 8 months every night. I think that's worth something." She looked at me for a long moment. "Saturday waffles," she said finally. "Every week, non-negotiable." "Deal," I said. Outside, the rain was gone. The sun was warm on the kitchen floor, falling across 4 plates and 2 little girls who had already decided, without any input from the adults, that they were going to be best friends. Some deals, it turns out, are the best kind, the kind that change everything, and feel, from the very first moment, exactly like home.